Sheppard. He runs Kabam, and if you don't already know Kabam, Kabam is one of the leading players in what we call mid-core gaming in the States. I don't know what you call it here in Asia. It's probably just games.
Probably.
And Andrew's spoken for me at a variety of times and always has a tremendous amount of information to present that's useful and actionable. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrew, and I'm going to go listen to what you have to say.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Dave. I really appreciate it. For those of you that attended Casual Connect in Hamburg, this is almost a continuation of the presentation that I gave there. Back then, Dave and the entire team, Jessica, Tennille, asked me to talk about mid-core gamers and what the segment is. And mid-core gaming, for me, is a really interesting space because I do believe it's part of being casual. It's also part of being core. And it really speaks to where the market is going overall, which is a much more mass market interpretation of gaming. And when I finished the presentation in Hamburg, I finished by talking about a title that we had not yet finished at that time. It's a game called Fast and Furious 6. It's based on the movie that will launch, at least in North America, next week. And it's a game produced by Kabam that's now live in the iOS store later this summer in Android. And the purpose of that was to kind of put a stake in the ground and not only tell folks in advance that Kabam is changing the way that it's building games and approaching the market, but doing so with conviction. And one of the areas that we've really built up as a capability is this, which is leveraging Hollywood IP to build some of the best games for the web, for mobile, for tablet. And I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how we look at that, which is very consistent with the way we look at the market. We try to do things different. We try to do things better. And hopefully you folks can take away from this some things that you can apply to your products. So with that, a little more on myself. So obligatory speaker slide. I head up the studios at Kabam. Kabam is divided into two halves. We have a publishing organization that works with independent game developers to bring games to the North American and European markets. They're a phenomenal team. In fact, we've got one of the representatives from that group here today, Denny Wu. If any of you are interested in talking with Kabam Publishing, he's the guy to talk to. And then the other side of the business is Kabam Studios. That's where we build and operate our own games. The core of that expertise is around mid-core titles. Our foundation is in strategy games and MMORPGs, and increasingly you'll see us push into more mass market game genres. I have about 500 million in free-to-play revenue experience. I've been in games for about 10 years. I've been doing free-to-play for 7 years. Not all of it as a product person, mostly actually as a strategy person. And then was the first gaming hire at Kabam. So Kabam, some key stats on who we are. As a company, we're not very good at promoting ourselves. We tend to be a little bit quiet about our accomplishments, but we are a top 10 mobile game company in the world. That's on both iOS and on Android. Our revenues are forecast to be 270 million. We take a very conservative measure of that, so that's after Apple transaction fees and Android transaction fees. That number is also conservative. We're very much on track to beat that. Last year we had 70% growth. This year we're forecasting 50% growth, but again, I think that's conservative. We should outperform that substantially. And at this point in time, we have 2 titles in the top 15 globally, and we have a third title, which is Fast and Furious 6, which is quickly climbing the charts. In North America, it's the #1 ranked racing app 5 days after launch in terms of grossing, so in terms of revenue. And it's also doing phenomenally well in a number of key markets. Also, we had the top grossing iOS application last year, which was a phenomenal accomplishment because it was our first game for mobile tablet. And for an American company, we're a very international company. We take a lot of pride in that. We're the first American company to push aggressively into Europe, and right now we're really trying to figure out how to compete successfully in Asia, which is a good reason why many of us from the studios and from publishing are here today. We're just very excited about the global trends behind gaming and think that mobile and tablet really redefines the way that gaming companies compete. I'll go quickly through this slide, but to give you a feeling for the reach, we recently opened an office in Seoul. We also opened an office in Berlin. Both of these offices are basically our commitment to get better at local execution in those respective markets, and you'll see us make further investments in other key markets. So first, a case study, as Dave mentioned, and is consistent with my past. I do like to talk about history, and I do like to talk about data. I find that at conferences, that's the best thing you can do to share with other folks, because it helps them make better decisions. So I'm not sure, it's hard to pull from console gaming, because it's very much a North America and European phenomenon. But hopefully everyone's familiar with the Atari 2600, which was something I grew up playing when I was a child. And possibly even with this game. So has anyone actually played E.T., the game that was based on the movie? All right, so you suffered. All right, so this will have special meaning for that guy over there. This was perhaps one of the worst games of all time. And I just want to talk about why it was so bad and why that's such a special thing for all of us and how we can learn from it. And why it is kind of the core insight into why Kabam is doing licensed products differently and ideally better. So the game was produced in 1982. It was developed and published by Atari, although they worked with an independent developer to produce the title. And this is incredible because you can't even do this today with some of the lower budget, like mobile titles, the indie projects. But the total dev budget was $200K, 200,000 US dollars. And the team that built the game had 5 weeks to complete the project. So what started off as being a project that could have spanned much longer duration of time got eaten up with contract negotiations, and then they basically got sandwiched between the holiday launch window and the deal close. So they only had 5 weeks to build the game. And as you know, no matter how simple the game is, 5 weeks is very little time to build a great product. Also, because the movie was such a phenomenon, E.T., hopefully everyone's seen the movie, it's a really good movie, retailers felt that this game would be really successful. So this was around the peak of the Atari 2600 as a platform. People were really excited about the platform. They're really excited about this licensing opportunity. And in fact, there were several publications that commented that, hey, E.T., the extraterrestrial, is a coup for Atari because they secured one of the biggest franchises of all time and should have the ability to make a really massive retail success. So, i.e. sell a lot of units. And almost in line with those expectations, and oftentimes forgotten in the gaming community, when this game launched, it did very well. It rose to be a top 4 title on the Billboard magazine's top video game sales charts, which is crazy because no one actually thinks of the business that way, but people actually tracked game sales through Billboard, which is a music magazine. And the game eventually sold 1.5 million units, and that was the most that Atari had ever sold on any single title before. So for all intents and purposes, it was the most successful Atari game ever. But not really. So what happened? The game was rushed to market, and as that gentleman probably knows over there, it was super buggy, it was super frustrating, and it was really difficult and unfun. And customers pretty quickly realized that the game wasn't good. So you basically, with these licensed console products, you sell through a bunch of the units because moms are buying it for their kids, or the kids have heard that it's coming out and they're excited about the IP, and then they take it home and then they realize it sucks and then it immediately dies. And that's what kind of started to happen here. Also, I won't go into the nuance of this, but retailers can buy inventory and basically assign the inventory back to the developer or the publisher of the game. So the retailers ended up picking up beyond the 1.5 million units that's sold, 2.5 to 3.5 million units of this game that never actually sold. So these were basically 2 to 3x the amount of units sold just ended up being waste. And you could see how bad this was from an ecosystem perspective because people were reselling copies of E.T. for 99 cents when the game launched at something closer to 50, 60 bucks. Also, with any licensed product, the IP is owned by somebody else, so you're having to pay them money for that license or that franchise. So for Atari, not only had they just eaten the bill on these 2.5 to 3.5 million units that they were unable to sell, but for every unit they did sell, they had to pay Spielberg for the right to use E.T. in the game. So their ability to earn back to a profit was diminished. So despite making 25 million in sales, this game lost Atari $100 million. And it basically led to Atari having 2 catastrophic years of financial performance as a, I think, then public company. and is oftentimes attributed with the start of the decline of Atari as a company. So massively destructive to the company and to the gaming ecosystem overall. And something kind of like that. And so I won't spoil the movie. E.T. doesn't die, but he gets really close. And it costs $100 million to restore him. So, and E.T. is not the only example of this, right? There are tons of examples of this. Ghostbusters by Activision, Superman, which was one of the worst N64 games ever. Sorry if anyone worked on it. Jurassic Park Trespasser. More recent titles like Walking Dead. There's a really great one by Telltale. This is the other one, which means it's the really bad one, by Walking Dead Survival Instinct, also an Activision title. And then Star Trek tied to the recently rebooted franchise. This is Namco Bandai, but both of those two games I think got like 30% out of 100 on the quality score, so really difficult. And you look at that and you say, hey, maybe this category is not a good category to compete in. And let's talk a little bit about what we can learn from these games, because it's not like these games, the people building these games are not bad game developers. They're actually exposed to very difficult situations for building a great game. First and foremost, for any title that's tied to a movie launch or a television series, there's a critical window for success on when you launch that title. You either want to be day and date, as they say, with the movie or the DVD release, or you want to hit the critical holiday sales period, which in Western markets is around Christmas. The challenge is when you're rushing against a hard ship date, it's really difficult to ensure that you're developing a really high quality product. And quality in terms of another franchise is difficult to define at times. You need to find that perfect balance of, hey, this fits the world, the universe of whatever this is, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, some of the titles we talked about before, like Ghostbusters. But then it also needs to have a reason to exist. So the gameplay has to be innovative, it has to be fun. So you're basically looking for ways to very authentically invoke the franchise, but then do it in a way that makes sense from a gaming perspective and kind of makes you want to play it. And that's really hard to do on a fixed timeline. Ultimately, the game has to be fun. You can't just rely on the box to ship the game. Like, that doesn't work. As we saw with E.T., if the box is shipping the game, but the game really sucks, then people aren't going to tell their friends about it. People aren't going to keep playing it. People are going to read reviews and know not to buy the game. And this applies for mobile. This applies for tablet as well. Reviews are really important. And then I mentioned this a little bit, but there are 3 dimensions by which a game has to be true to the master franchise. It's the story, the art direction, the gameplay. These are dimensions that we think about very critically when we embark on a new licensed project. And we'll kind of get into 2 examples of that later. And then this is the most important thing, and it pertains even more so to today's business, where all the games we build are more service-based products as opposed to packaged products. Once a game goes live, you have to be able to work with the license holder on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to continue to evolve the game, make it better, make it fully aligned with the potential of the franchise. So this is not an easy task. And this is something that Kabam has been fortunate to kind of ease their way into over time. And I'll tell you, if you were to compare the way that we first started out in this venue to the way that we do it today with some of the marketing folks that are executing it, it is night and day. Like, there is no way Kabam 2 years ago could compete with what we're doing today in terms of execution on this front. And so with all these challenges, it kind of raises the question, why work with licensed IP? There has to be value. And I can tell you with assurance that there is value. If you pick the right franchise, you pick the right gameplay mechanic, you execute really well, and then you nail the launch of that product, you can have a phenomenal success story from a business perspective. But it's hard, and you have to have the right people, process, experience. And the reason why we do these licensed products ultimately is because we believe in brands. Whether the brands are ours or somebody else's, doesn't matter. We want Kabam to be associated with the best brands, the best gameplay experiences, the most innovative product in the market. And we believe that we can do a great job of executing against those brands. So our key partnerships to date are these. We started with Paramount. They're a phenomenal partner. They worked with us on The Godfather. That's where I'd say we were learning how to ride the bike. With Hobbit and Warner Brothers is now an investor, as well as MGM. They worked together on the Hobbit movie. We had a phenomenal opportunity to do a game tied to all 3 of the Hobbit movies, with the first one already out and 2 more scheduled to be released this year and next year, respectively. And then Fast and Furious 6, which is tied to Universal. As I mentioned, will launch next week in North America, and I think it's a little bit later in Asia, although the dates vary by market. Also a phenomenal global opportunity. So Kingdoms of Middle-earth. So if you think back to the slide where I covered the success factors for a licensed product, this mobile game, starting first on iOS and then later on Android, had many of those constraints that we talked about. The overall dev cycle was 6 to 7 months in duration. The team had a very short period of time to immerse themselves within the lore of Middle-earth and to get approval from Peter Jackson and his team on the creative direction of the product. And they were doing it in a way that was tied directly to the movie launch, so there was no opportunity to slide ship dates. And all of that led to what I think was actually one of the most challenging, but one of the most healthy things that we did as a company. It forced us to kind of think about launching games more like the way traditional game developers do in North America and Europe. In other words, we started to think about shipping a product like it was a boxed product. And what that basically just means is when everything happens on day one, your entire execution has to be perfect. And what was really exciting about this is the team that brought the game to market, the team that built the product, they did it with incredible discipline. And what's also really exciting about a service-based game like this, what you'll see over the next 2 years, is we're going to adapt it to what the market has told us. So you'll see this game substantially grow. It is now, on just a revenue basis, our largest title. And that's in part due to the strong pairing of IP and gameplay. So really excited about this, really phenomenal franchise. And as I mentioned, it was one of our biggest titles. So kind of just give you a feeling, like we use App Annie as a way to index ourselves against the market. And what you can see here is just the number of countries where we hit highest grossing, like rank 1, rank 5 or above, rank 10 or above, rank 100 above. So you can see the game is available in 83 markets overall. And we hit number 1 in 14 of the overall grossing categories. For games, 18, simulation, 47, strategy, 33. And this defied our expectations. It was, without a doubt, one of our fastest growing titles. This all happened in a very short period of time. The game continues to be a juggernaut, continues to do well. But we're just blown away and really flattered by the response from the community. Until we did this game. And so this game launched 5 days ago. And it's been really cool because a group of us have been traveling that are working on this project, and we're literally checking every day to see how it's going. The movie, for those of you that may not be familiar with the franchise, is really awesome. We saw it at the premiere in London. It is really good. So I can't recommend it enough. This is one of the first significant departures for Kabam from what we're typically known for, which is these more hardcore strategy and RPG games. And so it's a mechanic that's very much the drag strip racing that was popularized by CSR, but was also created by drag strip racing or Car Town, games like that. It is almost a perfect pairing of IP, where the entire Fast and Furious franchise, but also this movie, is about really awesome cars and getting together with your crew and racing, battling against bad guys. And you'll see more and more of that kind of arc, those pillars become evident as we improve the feature set. This was our most complicated launch. It's the first time we've launched a product in Asia, so it's the first time we did double byte. So the game's available in Korea, it's available in Japan, it's available in China. It should be available in Singapore as well. And that's very difficult for an American company to do. Most American companies just launch in English and then they slowly move into other markets. And in order to pull that off effectively, we had to have a really tight partnership with our partners, both the movie production studio and also Apple in this case, because the game launched on iOS first. So all in, just bringing this product to market, although it wasn't like everyone being fully dedicated, it's probably like 50 to 70 people that are contributing in part or in whole to making this game a success. Also, the game execution is really great, and it's very rare that you get a chance to do a licensed product on a fixed ship date with a global launch in 11 countries, like 80 plus markets, and then still have room to do some innovation on the side. But they've really pushed the gameplay mechanic to a next level in a way that the audience has really responded to. So just due to time, I won't go into the video, although I'd love to show it to you. But it is awesome. And if you just search for Fast and Furious 6, the game, on YouTube, you should be able to see this trailer, or you can type in the short code, although it's not that short. It'll give you a feeling for the gameplay and what it's all about. And this is as of yesterday, so if I pulled it today, it'd be even better. But the game, in a very short period of time, 5 days, maybe less, is basically just capped out. So 43 markets, it's the #1 ranked racing game. And the team's just getting started. You'll see us on Android later this summer. The game will continue to evolve. It'll be everything that Kabam believes in, which is really great online service-enabled game, really deep social interactions, always great monetization. And that's it. So,
Thank you, Andrew.
thanks, Dave. Happy to field questions, and I'm also happy to talk more tactically about what it means to bring these products to market. I didn't want to go into that because I felt it might get a little too deep. I wanted to talk more about the fun, the complexity of it, but happy to talk in detail.
Can you tell a little bit about what you're seeing as far as difference in performance or difference in behavior for launching for the audience themselves, as far as how they react to the brand versus an unbranded game?
Versus, I'm sorry, Dave, versus original?
A branded game versus an unbranded game.
Unbranded game. The pull is very different up front. So for a branded game, and only in the case of mega franchises, or franchises that have really strong appeal, like Walking Dead. But what we've seen with the games, the franchises we've worked with, Hobbit, Godfather, Fast 6, people have a strong opinion of whether or not they like that franchise. So I imagine most people in the room saw The Hobbit. You have a very clear view of what The Hobbit means to you and why you like or dislike it. So your first point of engaging with the product is based on that experience base. Then once you kind of go past that, the game has to deliver on expectations. And this is a concept we talk a lot about when we think about marketing creative or the first-time experience within our games. But the game can't violate expectations as you pull people into the full experience. So, for example, if you show a picture of The Hobbit and then the next screen is like a sci-fi shooter game, people will quit because that violates expectations. And that happens on a very subtle way with the way that the gameplay works as well. If people go into The Hobbit and they expect it to be a shooter and it's more of a strategy game, it won't deliver on the expectations. Now, on the other side, with an unbranded game, you don't get that pull of the franchise, so you've got to have the game kind of sell itself. And the way to do that is definitely through product quality. But the onus is on you to show step by step that as people get deeper into the game, as they get deeper into the franchise, that their time spent is worthwhile. So it's more about earning trust rather than maintaining trust. That would be the key difference.
So I'm sure that there's other people that have questions for you, and they can catch up with you after the session is over. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to get their lunch and come back for the lunch session, which will start at 12:15. Andrew, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.